for that work.
I like punishment. The fact of the matter is that Mr. Douglas always worked in the classroom for me. It didn't matter whether it was prisoners, junior high school students, college level or graduate students. Douglas's works always resonated with my students, largely because he presented his own vulnerabilities. He talked about why it was difficult to think, why it was difficult to relate to others, what it was like to doubt and to have that self-doubt resonate through your life. So let me just give you 3 dates in order to answer the question about how all of this got started beyond the classroom. The first date is February 1, 1895. The second date is October 12 of 1995. The third date is October 1 of 2013. Those 3 dates are monumental in this very brief sketch. On February 1, 1895, Mr. Douglas gave his last public lecture on the campus of Westchester University. And the students discovered that from an assignment I gave them from my class. It was not only the discovery of that particular event, but we went on to discover that Mr. Douglas gave not only his last public lecture, but that he had been in Westchester every decade after his escape from slavery in 1838. And we can talk about why Westchester in the Q&A. The second date, October 12 of 1994, is the date when we sponsored a full academic conference in which more than 80 scholars from around the country and the world came to celebrate the centennial of Mr. Douglas's life. And that opened the door for us to establish an institute, and from that institute that worked well at Westchester, we were then able to take that entire apparatus, if you will, to the other 13 colleges and the other 13 universities in the state system. So no matter where you are in Pennsylvania, if you're close to one of our campuses, you will find a Douglas Institute there in one degree or another. The third date, October 1, of 2013, is the date when we unveiled a full human-size sculpture of Douglas on our campus, done by the distinguished sculptor Richard Blake, who also happened to be a member of the faculty. And it adds to what is now popularly understood, that this man you know as Frederick Douglass, whose real name was not Frederick Douglass, any more than Harriet's full name was Harriet.
What was his real name?
Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey. We can get into that as well a little later on. But in any event, the point to be made about our sculpture is to encourage you to come and see it. The second part is for you to know that Frederick Douglass is the most photographed American in the 19th century. Not just African American, the most photographed American. And we can talk about how all of that developed as well. So how did all of this get started? It remained a classroom initiative that I felt, along with the other members of my team, would be a subject that would work on any campus, anywhere. And that's how we got started, and that's how it continues to go, because Douglas is not a dead end for anybody. He's a beginning in much the same way as the study of Tubman is as well.
And I just want to hold up Dr. Trotman's book, and he is a Frederick Douglass biographer as well. And so, you guys we need to support our scholars and our authors. So just wanted to put a little plug in there. I want to turn to you, Erica. So you wrote this incredibly successful book that preceded this She Came to Slay biography. It was called Never Caught, and it was about the life of Ona Judge, who was an enslaved woman under the George Washington's household here in Philadelphia, and she escaped and was never caught. And you can talk about that way better than I can. But my question is, she was a figure that was not known at all by anyone, really, until you really brought her to life. Conversely, Harriet Tubman is someone who everybody thinks they know about, and her name is just like, her and Frederick Douglass are two of the most widely known African American, freedom fighters that we don't really know that much about, but we know their names. So I want to see if you could talk about how your experience was different in writing this Harriet Tubman biography versus the Ona Judge story, and what you learned about Harriet Tubman in this process that you did not know before.
Yeah, no. Well, first let me just thank you, Sarah, for convening all of us this evening. Thank you to WRD and to the Barnes Foundation for allowing us to spend time on November 1st, on the day that the feature film Harriet is released nationwide. And I said something on social media today that today's a good day for Black women's history. And so it's only, I think, fitting that I'm here in my home city with WURD talking about just that, about Black women's history, about Black history in general. And yeah, the writing, so this book that's coming out on Tuesday, She Came to Slay, was a very different project. Thank you for holding up the book, Sarah.
I'm a marketer at heart.
It was a very different project than the book that I wrote previously, Never Caught. Never Caught was something that I had worked on for almost a decade before it was published. And it was a project that allowed me to stay true to who I am as a scholar, which is to think about Black women's experiences in the 18th and 19th century. I'm a scholar of Black women's history. That's what I do, that's who I am, that's what I claim. And so really writing about Ona Judge was writing about fugitivity, what it meant to be a fugitive, to think about living in the shadows, not able to really sort of understand, experience freedom. So my editor came to me and asked me would I be interested, we knew that the film was coming out this November, would I be interested in writing a sort of shorter, accessible biography of Tubman as someone who sort of was a specialist in fugitive Black women. And I thought about it, and I'll admit, at first it was a little daunting. I've taught Tubman for a long time. There are multiple biographies of her, most of them written by white women. And I paused for a moment, and I didn't agree to write the book until I felt as though I could add something different, something new. And one would ask themselves, well, we all know Tubman. What's new about Tubman? And I thought, well, we haven't really heard Tubman through the lens of a Black woman scholar. And then it was time to make that accessible and public, but also to bring Harriet Tubman into the 21st century. And to modernize her, to think about her. We all think we know Tubman from that quarter of the textbook page from your high school history book, or your Sunday school class, or your Black History Month program in church. And while all of those moments are important and introduce us to someone who we all should know, we all really know very little about her. My son, who's 15, he was showing me this little thing, this app called TikTok. I don't know if you all have heard of this. Somebody's own. Oh, okay, I'll stop. But one of these other little apps where they take little movies or what have you, and there was a TikTok, supposedly, of someone with a camera going around the campus of Harvard University. That's what they said. I did not see a sign that said Harvard, but that's what was said. And they had a picture of Harriet Tubman. And they were going around to students. They looked fairly young, so perhaps first and second year students, asking them, who's this woman? Nobody knew. Rosa Parks? Rosa Parks like 5 times. But when you said the name, no, it's Harriet Tubman. Oh, yes, we know Harriet Tubman. Do you really know Harriet Tubman? What we know, or what is still talked about, is her experience emancipating herself, and then spending nearly a decade as a sort of conductor on the Underground Railroad. And those experiences are super important, but really they only capture about a decade of her life. And Tubman lived until she was about 91 years old. So one of the things I wanted to do in my book was to help us think about Tubman not only as that person on the Underground Railroad, not only as the sort of image that we have of her, elderly, head covered, hands clasped, but that Tubman was much more than that. Who was she as a child? Who was Araminta Ross? Her name, her given name when she was born. Who was she as a child? Who was she as a teenager? As a newlywed, under slavery? Who was she as a Civil War hero? Who was she in the 50 years after the Civil War? What was her life like? How did she contribute? How did she maintain the status of a sort of social justice warrior? Because she did just that. So I made the decision to write the book when I felt as though I could answer those questions, and to do it in a way that added significant Black girl magic.
Amen.
All right, then.